Welcome to DECKSIDE. Today, guys, we're hanging out with Bryan Brinkman for another amazing episode and casual conversation on the deck side of the swamp. Sean, what's up, man? How you doing?
I'm doing well, doing well. Bryan Brinkman is an amazing digital artist, has a lot of really fantastic work all around, including SuperRare. And I can't wait to kind of talk to him and get to know what he's up to and hopefully get to understand some of the lessons learned along his journey, because his story is pretty fascinating.
Absolutely. Well, we're going to welcome up Bryan Brinkman right now. Welcome to DECKSIDE. How you doing, sir?
I'm doing great. I'm actually enamored by this like magic ball in the background. What's going on there above the basketball?
Oh, this thing right here?
Yeah.
That's my Kagami. That's like a mirror. It's actually part of it's considered art from the 10KTF project. Are you familiar with 10KTF?
Yeah.
So yeah, they have there's a lot of speculation around it. It's a portal, and when it's off, when the display is off, it's a mirror. And really it's a reflection of season 1 of 10KTF. And so that's like one of the physical art pieces.
That's impressive merch.
Yeah.
That's cool. It looks like a hologram.
Yeah. It's pretty rare, right?
Yeah, there's only 893 of them, and it's one of 10KTF's first like physical hardware products.
Wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, thank you. You got some really cool stuff in the background.
I got I got an ever-growing pile of stuff. I'm a big collector of all sorts of things. So the NFT space only amplified my desire to collect things.
Well, it does look like you have a ton of your own art behind, which looks really cool. I mean, I love seeing that big print, and I know you've got some stuff that's been looking at your website, some very very cool visuals. But like I want to ask you before we kind of get into the Web3 world is what did you do before you came into Web3? Who is Bryan Brinkman? Just a quick, because I've watched
existential question.
Yeah, let's get deep with it. No, because I've watched a lot of your interviews, and we all want to know who you are, but it's only because we're so excited to learn more about your art. So if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, well, let's go back, I guess, 20 or so years. I was in high school making internet cartoons for websites like Newgrounds. Got really excited about like seeing people react to whatever I was making. And so from that, I kind of steered into like, oh, I want to make films. And then a friend of mine that I met through Newgrounds, who was a big part of my journey, was like, Tim Burton, because I was like, I want to be like Tim Burton. And they're like, Tim Burton was an animator. And if you learn animation, you learn how to make films, and you learn how to illustrate, and you learn how to do editing, and you learn everything. It's a soup to nuts kind of career.
Oh, interesting.
And I'm sorry to interrupt, Bryan, but what were you doing? Newgrounds was such an amazing site with so much art and animation. Were you using Flash at the time?
Well, kind of. I was using an Adobe software called Live Motion, which was their competitor to Flash, which did not succeed. But what it ended up evolving into was kind of what Adobe After Effects is now. And so that learning that gave me a head start with After Effects early in my career. But I do use Flash a lot. I still use it now. It's called Adobe Animate. Adobe bought Flash. But at the time it was like, basically drawing stuff in Illustrator, bringing it into Live Motion, and then exporting these SWIFTs. For people that are too young, prior to the YouTube days, video wasn't possible on the internet very well. And so people were making, vector-based Flash animations because you could make kind of high resolution cartoons that way. So that kind of inspired me to go learn animation. I went to school in Philadelphia, University of the Arts, which kind of taught me how to make like, not necessarily like Warner Brothers cartoons, but how to make short films for festivals, like more like personal artsy films.
Oh, nice.
And so that gave me a wide skill set that then afterwards I moved to New York, and I had this jack of all trades skill set that I worked in a fashion advertising firm for a while. I worked as an intern for an MTV show called Wonder Shows, and I worked on toy commercials. I worked everywhere and anything I could do. And while I was doing that, I was also making websites, making concert posters, making music videos, doing anything I could creatively as well, which eventually became like gallery shows that I was part of, like group shows out in LA. And then for a long arc of my pre-NFT career, I would say 8 years of it, I was working at The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon, and I was working at Saturday Night Live doing graphic art, the graphics for the shows or visual effects for the pre-tapes at SNL. And so I was working kind of 6 days a week at NBC. And while I was there, I discovered NFTs via an artist that you can see some of his work over my shoulder. I gotta learn how to point. Killer Acid, awesome dude.
He's amazing.
Awesome.
And so I saw him selling on SuperRare, and I was like, "What's SuperRare? What's Ethereum? What's these 3 dashes?" And I kind of went down a rabbit hole for a couple of weeks trying to learn about NFTs. This was December 2019. And then, a couple of weeks later, I made a video. Back then you had to make a video for SuperRare, and you'd be like, "Hi, I'm Bryan. I want to make NFTs.
Yeah.
And here's kind of what I do."
Yeah.
It's really exclusive. It's one of the hardest marketplaces to get put up on and be featured, because it was so heavily focused on curating some of the best digital artists. And and that's one of the things I appreciated about SuperRare, is that they had such a high level of curation for it, and you really got to see some of the best digital art that was out there.
I think that requiring that video created a level of, I don't know how to describe it. It was put you out of your comfort zone to a degree that it eliminated probably 70% of the people that might have just been like doing it for fun, because for most artists it's hard to put yourself out there like that,
right?
And so
1000%.
Yeah. And so so I got on in January, and then I mentioned my first NFT in February 2020. And then I was still working at those NBC jobs, and then about like a month or two later, COVID happened. And then I was like, oh, well, I don't have to commute into the city. I have all this extra time. And I spent a lot of time, again, focusing on the NFTs, playing around in like crypto voxels and metaverses. And then, just putting out, my goal at the time was to put out one of one a week, as like just a challenge to myself to make an interesting piece of art once a week. And eventually it slowed down to every 2 weeks, and then every 3 weeks, and every 4 weeks. But then, 9 months later, I had built, enough of a reputation that, someone curated me for a a NiftyGateway drop. And then a couple months later, I did my art blocks drop. And then, after a year in the space, I was in a position where like my art was connecting and doing well, and I could do it full time. And so that was kind of my journey of, again, I saw NFTs back then as a new version of like Tumblr. I was like, this is a cool community of digital art focused people that are doing interesting things. I didn't foresee it being a full-time career. But, a year later, Beeple happened, Top Shot happened, all these things kind of rolled together where I was like, oh, this is, a career path. And it all coincided at the time. I was working at SNL. My buddy Manny and I did Nimbuds a month or two prior. And then they said, hey, we have this new bit about NFTs. And I was like, oh, NFTs are no longer just a bubble in Discord. It's actually like a pop culture thing that's known to a degree. And so all those things kind of came out at the same time, where I was like, okay, this is an opportunity and a path that is, a possible career. And thankfully it has become that. Yeah.
That's amazing. That's an amazing story. And I'm really blown away by how many artists find their journey from, creative in a traditional sense, in a job, in a firm, whatever they have to do, and then find this sort of freedom when they come to the Web3 world. Did you find that sort of experience for yourself as an artist, like less restriction? You don't have to do tasks for certain jobs now. You can create and explore what your mind, wants to offer as a creative person.
100%. I mean, working those jobs, I really enjoyed them because especially those kind of like late night shows. Every single day is a new list of jokes, a new list of tasks, a new challenge of like, do a Dr. Seuss inspired illustration, do a Schoolhouse Rock inspired, and it was kind of like, how do you're building skills constantly. And so, but the difference is, all of those ideas were me executing other people's concepts. It was working with writers, working with producers, etc. And they say, hey, we want to do this idea, and now you make it funny, which is a fun task, but you have very little ownership of that. And in the end, working on those shows, no one goes, hey, I wonder who made the graphic on that thing. It's like, we're just a name in the credit list that almost always gets cut off due to time anyways.
Or it goes by like, like very quickly.
Yeah. So, that was why I was doing music videos and posters and gallery shows on the side, because I felt much more ownership of that stuff. And in the same way, when I joined the NFT space, I was like, okay, I can make art that represents me and my perspective on this. And it doesn't have to be humor based. It can be, the difference I saw when I joined the space was, I'll give myself 1 week to make a piece of art, which is, 5 or 6 more days than I usually get to make anything working at these shows, because everything on those shows is made in a couple hours. Right. And then it goes to air, and then it's, once it's seen by the audience and on TV, then it's
out there,
it's done, and it's forgotten a day later.
Yeah.
And so there was this kind of fun aspect of these NFTs being this kind of moments that you can spend some time on, and then they live forever.
That's awesome.
One of the questions I had as you were talking about putting out consistent work. And I think obviously with your profession, you are getting reps in, right? Constantly honing those skills. As you were putting out, one original piece per week or every other week, etc., what were some of your goals there? Was it really just to set the goal of putting something out, or were you like focused on something every single week?
My goal early on, and I think, I have a blog post I wrote like very early on, and my goal was to experiment, try different things, use this new technology in interesting ways, also grow my skill set in like learning 3D better, or like learning all these other things. I saw it as a challenge to myself, especially because you guys probably remember during COVID, during that like initial time, you're like, oh, I got all this time, I got to improve myself. And so everyone had their different, whether it was exercise or building their house or whatever it was, everyone kind of created these goals during that time frame. And so that was my goal, is like, how do I create a system in which, there it is, in which I could push myself in all these directions, but figure out a way to make them consistently connected. And so I did that by using a color scheme throughout a lot of it. I used it by repeating symbology of like wires and clouds and diamonds and things that I used to represent various things. But yeah, I mean, those first like 5, I was just kind of I was like, what's interesting? Because again, being an animator, there was never a way for me to kind of make an animation that I could sell, or like an enclosed thing. It was, you either executed other people's ideas, like a music video or a commission for parents.com or Sesame Street or something like that, which are always fun and cool. But again, no one really looks at that and goes, who made that, and so it was kind of figuring out these ways of monetizing animation, which sounds like capitalistic, but there was just never a way to do that. And it's a whole industry of people, and it's a whole art form. There's Oscars for it and all these other things. But most of the time, you put your film into a festival with the hope that someone says, "Oh, I want to make that into a TV show," or "I want to hire you to do that style for a car commercial," or it was always this kind of like business card that didn't necessarily equate to a career. The career was always kind of a soul crushing thing where you're executing other people's ideas.
It sounds like to me that, it's one thing to kind of take what you can do, your skills, and the art is in making it something that could live on its own, you know, where
Yeah.
it's not necessarily tied to a different concept. It is the concept, you know, and it becomes a product at that point that could be sold. And when you were putting out those different pieces, when you say you're putting it out there, are you just like posting it, or are you actually minting it onto the chain?
In which regards, like my early NFTs, or
yeah, well, your early art as you were just like putting things
I was
out.
just putting them out on Tumblr or Instagram or LiveJournal or whatever there was. You know,
just
whatever the social media was.
Right?
Yeah, it was just like, you know, you do
That's
a
like how
doodle
people
and
did
you
it
share
too.
it.
Yeah.
And then, you know, sometimes I would find ways to convert my digital art into physical art that could be sold. Which was, you know, if you go back to that page, there was a thing called the 3D cell explainer. That was what I did for galleries for many years, which was I drew it digitally, and then I would print it out on transparency layers and then paint the back, and it would create these kind of 3D shadow boxes. And so that was a way for me to kind of take the art of animation, which is like animation cells and layering, and turn it into a fine art piece. And so that was cool. Kind of you know, my niche thing I created for a while.
That's super sick. So right now on screen, like for anyone who can't see it, if they're just listening, we have a one of these shadow boxes with the Jessica Rabbit and and Roger Rabbit hanging here. That's so cool.
So the gallery I did it for was Gallery 1908, and there's other ones like Bottleneck and all these other ones that would be kind of theme shows of like, this is a Rick and Morty art show, this is a Monty Python art show, and so you'd have these kind of prompts to work from, which was kind of nice. But again, when I joined the NFT space, I was like, I don't want to bring that over either, because I don't own the rights to those things. I don't want my art to just be, again, influenced by other people's creative choices.
Right.
But there is a whole industry of pop culture art, which is a fun world.
Which you're clearly influenced by. I mean, it shows up in your work. Your work like screams pop art to me. Like it's really out there. It stands out, and very friendly to the eyes. You know,
the vibrancy is nice.
Thank you.
Even your bright bull jacket. I had a friend I told we were gonna have a chat with you today, and he said make sure to tell him that his hoodie is one of the most comfortable and well-made hoodies that he's ever bought.
It's a very comfy hoodie. I mean, it's sitting over there. It's a little hot in here, otherwise I'd put it on. Actually, it's because I have a space heater on in here. Yeah, no, I think when it comes to my art, I kind of use these colorful aspects as a way to kind of draw in the eye. And then if people want to dive deeper, they can like learn what the pieces are about. And usually they're about my opinions of the space, or my feelings or emotions or life or death and all these other things that might be a little too heady if you just hammer it on people. But if you, I equate it to kind of like putting the, like the sugar coating on a pill you have to swallow or something. Like it just makes it easier to, like, if you're walking by something, you can go, oh, that's nice. And then if you want to dive into it, you could take away a deeper meaning. But I try to keep it a little more subtle with these kind of symbols. And, you know, I document what my things mean, but I've also had a lot of collectors say like, I don't want to be told what art is. I want to decide for myself. So I'm like, well, this allows kind of both aspects.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I love the busyness of these pieces. Like I absolutely love it.
It becomes a pattern.
Yeah, like exactly like you said, you can have your own narrative, but also people can just look at it and create their own narrative with their own imagination. And both of them could be completely correct in the experience as you know, the owner, right? So
yeah, I mean, all these symbols are references to other super rare pieces I made. So it's like all those connect to various things, either from my career or from the pieces I made. So it's kind of fun to like, it's like a Where's Waldo to a degree.
Yeah, that's what it reminded me of. And, you know, as you were working on your different art pieces that you were putting out, and that was like really cool to see that frame. What did you call it? The 3D?
Oh, a 3D cell. Yeah.
The 3D cell. Like,
I need to trademark that. No, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, you probably do.
Well, that comes from my own. Again, I'm a collector of many things, and one of the things I love to collect is animation art. And so I have a bunch of animation cells from like Nickelodeon shows and all these other things. So it's influenced.
It shows the concept of layering really well too. So when did you decide to actually start minting your stuff on your artwork onto the chain, and how do you balance like deciding what am I going to actually put on chain as an art piece versus just saturating the market with a bunch of different art?
That's a great question, and I don't know if I have the perfect answer. I mean, I know when I started, which was February 2020, and back then there was a lot less pressure. You know, I think the biggest NFT sale at the time was like a couple $1,000s for pack, and so it's not like, you know, the world of six-figure sales didn't exist. And so to me, it was like, oh my gosh, I'm making $200 on this SuperRare one of one. That's incredible, because I had been doing those gallery shows and those 3D cells. I was selling those for like $300, $350 each. And the gallery takes 50%, and I had to pay for shipping, and I had to pay for the supplies to make it. And in the end, I was walking away with maybe like $50. And so I was like, oh, well, you know, this is a way better solution, because one, I don't have to do all of this manual physical stuff, shipping and building and all this other stuff that takes many, many hours. I can just sell an animated GIF. Again, I'm dating myself. Back then, you couldn't upload video files to SuperRare. It was only GIFs. And so there was this kind of fun challenge to how much information visually could you fit into 50 megabytes into a GIF, which is like the hardest thing to compress anyways. And I think if you look at like all that old stuff, it was all those like satisfying loops. And a lot of that was just because you were able to get like 9 seconds of attention out of a 2-second loop before people started to realize where that seamless loop was. And so that was kind of the fun challenge, is like, how can you do a lot with a little? And we're seeing that same kind of thinking right now with like ordinals.
Yeah, I was going to say with ordinals, you know, being able to fit it within, was it 256? How many kilobytes?
It's really small, but now they have all this recursion stuff, which is interesting.
Yeah. But the thinking, like the medium actually changes the way the artist conceptualizes the way they are going to put out their art.
Like, I didn't have to think about sound until like maybe 6 months into my NFT journey, which I still, most of my sound stuff is made with my mouth and stuff. I'm like making weird noises and stuff. Yeah, there's something so visual about it that I really enjoyed it. And then this idea, the question you had was, you know, how do I decide what does and doesn't get made?
Yeah.
So, you know, there's a gut feeling to it. Sometimes I share it with other people, see what the reactions are. But usually, you know, when something feels right and when something feels unfinished. And there's, you know, an insane amount of unfinished things that I've made that I could have minted. But usually the thought around what gets minted is often connected to the mechanics of the drop, the platform, the occasion. You know, what if it's a charity drop, you know, then, you know, it's like all those things influence how the piece is made in my mind. There's rarely a time where I'm just making art with no plan in mind. Usually I'm making something and I'm going, okay, this is a collection that centers around this theme, or this is something to, you know, sometimes it'll be, you know, say like Dewdrops, which unfortunately went under this summer, but it was a text message based minting platform. And so that inspired me to make a piece that was about text messaging, you know? So it's like, there's sometimes the mediums influence the creative in a fun way. And I like experimenting with the mechanics and the technologies in the space. Yeah. And so awesome. I enjoy having work that highlights why I'm interested in that as well.
That's cool.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I think one of the jobs of an artist often for myself is for them to capture like culture and capture, you know, what's happening in front of you. So for you to say sometimes what's just happening may influence what is curated or created, totally makes sense, you know. But then I also wondered, as I'm looking at your page, I see you've had you know, items at Sotheby, right? And like, do you have this is a really cool visual item right here. Do you create this knowing that it's going to go there, or do you just create this and somehow it ends up here because of, you know, marketing and hard work, or how does that happen, just out of curiosity?
Well, with this one, for example, people from Sotheby's had reached out to see if I had work on the secondary that a collector would want to sell. And I reached out to a few collectors and none of them wanted to sell. And so they're like, well, we have this upcoming show that's focused on satisfying 3D loops. Do you want to make a piece for that? And so that inspired this then,
Very
you know,
nice.
to how I got. And so this piece, you know, it's a loose visualization of the creative process. These balls represent ideas. You know, the rain cloud is, you're feeding them, they go into your head, you regurgitate it. You know, there's like ramp, you see it kind of swirls around. These text message things represent you sharing it with other people. You're hitting writer's blocks with those blocks, and you kind of toss it around and you iterate it in a few different ways, and then eventually an idea forms, and then you go through that process over and over and over. So that's kind of, you know, using this piece to kind of share that. But to, again, if someone's walking by it, they just go, oh, this is a fun, goofy little thing or something. You know, they don't need to know all that. Cool. So yeah, so sometimes like this one, I made it with Sotheby's in mind. And then, you know, but, you know, I've had work sold at Sotheby's that was on secondary that, you know, it was just stuff I made for other things that was then resold there. So
very cool.
It's always kind of random, but yeah, I would say, you know, there's usually various inputs that go into that process of thinking.
I appreciate you answering that question, because we have a lot of aspiring artists and creatives in our community who would love to, you know, understand how does that process work of getting your art to that level of, you know, basically that's a high level of statement in, you know, in the Web3 world. So to be able to sell your items at Sotheby's or any big auction house or platform.
That was my first primary sale at Sotheby's, which was really exciting because, you know, well, one, you know, with secondary, you only get a fraction or whatever. But, you know, it also, it's like kind of out of your control in that sense on the secondary. It's fun to see what happens on the secondary, but you have very little control. And so, you know, with Sotheby's, I had 2 different sales in which my Art Blocks project resold, and then one where my Genesis NFT from SuperRare resold as well. So it's been interesting. And like the iterations of that, one was on their metaverse website, one was on their regular website, you know, so like each one's its own unique, weird experience. But it does feel a little more hands off when it's a secondary sale, because it's kind of just like, you're just kind of a viewer in that sense.
Yeah, but that was like a really great example as you were explaining it, and as I was looking at it, at kind of how you mentioned you're really sharing like a perspective on the space or how you view something, in this case like your creative process, and articulating that somehow through your artwork. And you're right, like if someone just looks at it, it's just like a really satisfying loop that they can look at. But I really enjoy seeing it connected to like your idea and the concept behind it. So that kind of leads me into thinking about how the technology has really enabled this kind of renaissance of art, especially digital art. Where do you think this is kind of leading into? How do you stay within the times, because there's so much art that's out there? There is a saturation of like NFTs are down. How do you stay innovative within the space?
So where do I think the space is going? I think you're right, the space is down. I often tell people it's down but moving forward, because, you know, there's always this monetary aspects, and that's going to always go up and down. My new piece I'm doing with AOTM next week, which will be a week or two before this airs, is, you know, a representation of the crypto cycle and how it goes up and down and up and down and up and down. And so that's always going to be this aspect, and people will attach monetary values to the success of the space. And looking at, this might be dated by the time it airs, but the Rolling Stone article that said NFTs are worthless, that came out the same week that the Whitney acquired an NFT. The MoMA announced NFTs. LACMA did a drop. Multiple other museums are acquiring NFTs right now. And then Sotheby's and Christie's are both doing, NFT artists in their shows. So that, that juxtaposition is clearly off in terms of worth. But yes, 95% or even higher of the space will go to zero. But that doesn't mean, that's based on floor prices. And for the most part, art doesn't have a floor price for them. Sometimes it does, to a degree. There's certain collections that you put out that have large amounts that have that, but like most one of ones don't have active offers or floor prices, and so like it's really hard to quantify those statistics. And a lot of those pieces of art have a value to the collector that isn't monetary. And I think it's hard for people to fully wrap their minds around that kind of aspect of the space. Like I collect a lot of art with zero expectation of one, reselling it, or even it holding value. I'm buying it because I'm investing in artists that I want to see continue to make art. And I think a lot of people, that's the different aspect of the space between the collectible side of the space and the art side of the space. Art is still an investment, don't get me wrong, but it's not, the time horizon is totally different. And I think a lot of people are so used to this like 1 hour flip world that they don't fully, equate it correctly. And I think, that part of that is, the dramatic rise of the space had a big effect on the narrative of it, and,
Sure.
It's like people selling for 69 million created unrealistic expectations. But at the same time, there's plenty of success stories in the space. And I'm still very optimistic that digital art is in a way better place than it was 3 or 4 years ago. And I don't see that validation going down in the same way that volume goes down. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So volume goes down, but appreciation goes up.
Anyone who's still continuing to do this, in my opinion, are builders, people who are invested into pushing the space forward. If you're out here releasing your art, putting in work, then you can see that this is more than just the monetary value of it. It's really pushing the culture, pushing something forward. And that's kind of where the term Renaissance kind of comes into play, because I do feel that there wasn't an appreciation for digital art at first, for digital creators. It was always the platforms just continuing to extract value out of that in different ways. And now there is a sense of ownership that you may have to it. And what's really cool to hear, especially as you were talking about the museums starting to acquire and curate more digital and NFT art, is the partnerships, the long-term cosigns, where it's like, okay, we need to start thinking about what is the strategy moving forward, because it is going to grow, it is going to saturate in the future, inevitably. More and more content creators, more and more people have access to the tools. And so this is really the time to refine it. And I'm curious, like, what are some of your thoughts on the museums acquiring NFT art? Has there been any, best practices that you have kind of getting into museums or getting in front of people that may have some sort of, influence on getting art put into museums?
That's a good question. I don't know the process exactly. I know a few people that work for museums that make those choices, but I haven't directly dealt with them. But you look at the Whitney, that was done via like Keith Grossman and MoonPay were on the board that decided that. And so like this Web3 people making those decisions in tandem. And so again, it's awareness.
Good point.
I think they chose Lovid, who's an awesome duo that does generative art and physical art and fabric art and amazing stuff. And so it made total sense to me that they would be one of the the first kind of Web3 person.
I like that. It makes sense because a lot of these people are present in the space. When you're tapping into X Spaces or back in the day, Clubhouse, a lot of the people that you mentioned were very present on there, connecting with artists, and talking with them. And so when I do hear those names kind of brought up, it's great to hear that people within the community are the ones that are also curating it. And it almost feels like, okay, cool. This is not some sort of like cash grab or anything like that. These are people who are respected within the culture of NFT art. Yeah,
they're stewards of the space. They're not just selling their art, but they're educating people at the same time.
Yeah. Well, to kind of piggyback off that and to kind of transition to another thought I've had, as a steward of the space, I see on your Twitter profile that you're an art advisor for a few projects. And one of them I found really interesting. It's something, who's related to a Bored Ape friend of ours for a long time, Jenkins the Valet. It says here on your page that you're an art advisor to Azurbala, and
yes.
I myself am curious, what is it like as an artist to also be an art advisor to projects and offer your insight and your knowledge? Because that project has had a sort of resurrection from where it first appeared to where it may be going now, and I'm curious, is your involvement part of that experience?
Yeah. So in general, I've taken on a few advisory roles, especially in this bear market. It's a nice way again to like find some income without having to put out more NFTs into the market. But with Jenkins, for instance, what happened was they put out a teaser of their project and it was universally panned. I think I even made jokes about it on Twitter because it was hilariously bad. And no offense to the artist that did it, but it wasn't well received. And so they made a very bold pivot, which was we're going to scrap this whole thing. And we're going to create two different councils. One is a community council of their like top community members. And then one is an art council, which they got, I think, shout out to Thread Guy. He recommended, I think, the art council. It was me, OSF, Mando, and All Smiles. And so and then they hired a really accomplished animation artist, Ty. And so it kind of, then we jumped on calls and we talked about, what was wrong about that? How do we build a better base? I mean, most of that discussion was about, how to build the best like head shape that works as a PFP. You have to get as simple as kind of reducing it to the very base, and then once that you can build it out. And so it was a long process. It was like 6 months of back and forths, giving feedback, kind of sometimes it's filling out questionnaires, sometimes it's jumping on Zooms and looking at outputs, and like it was a very fun process. And then but also advising them on how to kind of release it and all that. And so I appreciated that they made it a free burn. They did all sorts of kind of cool things. And yeah, I think unfortunately the PFP market's rough right now. But I think the overall response to the art was overwhelmingly positive. And I think even though they lost maybe like 6 to 8 months of time, they're coming out a lot stronger with a base now. And so yeah, I mean that that was an interesting example. And I give a lot of credit to a team that's willing to admit, hey, this wasn't right. We saw it recently with like Nakamigos. Everyone didn't like the cloaks reveal and they were like, hey, we're going to pivot. That's one of the best things about the space is that any mistake can be undone to a degree, whether it's creating burn mechanisms or pivoting before launch. I think the only time you really get into trouble is when you like sell something without showing people what they're buying or something, then you're putting yourself at a high risk. But as long as people understand what they're getting ahead of time, they can make informed decisions, and you're going to be okay.
I love that. I appreciate that answer. And, and it leads to kind of my follow-up of, as an artist who's been, now in the space for years, creating as a digital artist, with this new career path, like you said, what are some of the challenges you see in front of yourself as you kind of continue to grow as an artist here in Web3? Is there anything that we might have our audience be able to learn from you, that say, this is something that I've overcome, but it was initially not so easy?
I would say, I mean, my experience, I've always liked taking weird risks, and I find a platform that I think is doing something interesting, and sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't. Thankfully, my collector base is very, forgiving. I don't know. And I don't do it in a way that's like a 10K project or something. But I think that's the problem as an artist. You'll be courted by a lot of platforms and projects and people that want to have you come be a part of it. And sometimes those projects don't work out, whether it's the drop doesn't do well, or the platform runs out of money and they have to kind of give up. Or even like Dewdrops this summer, I thought that platform was brilliant, and it sold out every drop and was doing great, but the underlying tech they used, Recur, folded. And so then that kind of put them in a position where it was dead essentially, and had to get all this stuff out of wallets. And it's like, as much as what I bought into was a success, the underlying tech was not. And I think we'll see more of that going forward. Unfortunately, money's tight right now, and a lot of these things didn't have a lot of runway. And so that's the challenge right now, is that because I made a lot of interesting bets on this is interesting, I'm going to try it. Sometimes that becomes art blocks. I was the 10th drop on art blocks before Ringers and Fidenzas, and that became huge. Sometimes it's NiftyGateway in 2020, and then that became huge. And then sometimes it's, not to throw anything under the bus or anything, but sometimes it's a project that just doesn't take hold or something,
Sure.
and figuring out how to go forward with that, whether you make it right or whether you just allow it to be what it is, whether you do burn, that's up to the artist. But those are just the kind of the hurdles you have to deal with in this space, is because a lot of the times, unless you're fully independent, Manifold didn't exist when I joined the space. So a lot of my NFTs are on random contracts like Rarible or SuperRare. Those are the mistakes that I made back then that I wish I had my own smart contract back then. But there wasn't an easy way to do that. Rarible was like the easiest way to mint. And it's because it's minting to their like collection contract that's a huge mess now to deal with. And so a lot of my NFTs are really hard to find. So those are the kind of the weird things you have to deal with as an artist. And then I think as long as you are selling your art as art and not promising stuff and not creating games and not creating an open edition that's out of control or something, you'll attract the right kind of collectors. When you get into those other games, you attract the degens, and they're going to care less about the art and more about the performance. And they'll have much less patience,
Do you think it's still worth doing drops with NFT platforms now that there are easy ways for an artist to launch their art on their own smart contract?
That's a good question. Yes, I still think there is, especially as an up and coming artist. Again, going back to like Sotheby's and all these things, those are all validators for artists. We don't have to go to Sotheby's, but if I go to Sotheby's to impress my mom and grandma, it's a validator. And again, you guys mentioned it. It's a part of the resume that you go, ooh, that person's validated. If I only sold my stuff on Manifold, it'd be much harder for you to decide if I was, was a curated or something. So there is a bonus to being in curated drops on Foundation or SuperRare or NiftyGateway, or all these things. They're all checks on your artist's CV resume. That I think still do matter. The problem that all these platforms have is that they anoint all these artists, make them big, and then those artists go, well, I don't need to give you 15% anymore. And then they go do it on their own. And I think that's where all these platforms are now struggling, is that all their top earners are just cutting them out now. But I still think they all serve a very important purpose on that rise aspect for the artist trajectory.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, I think every platform has strengths. I think NiftyGateway, I've done a lot of drops of them. I think they're the most fun platform in the space. Their mechanics are fun. They're easy to onboard people with credit cards and all sorts of other stuff. And it's centralized, so they don't need to have a MetaMask if they don't want it. Like there's bonuses to that versus Manifold, which then if someone wants to buy it, they have to go through all these hard steps right now. I think Manifold might support credit cards now. Yeah, I think that's the challenge. It's like, you know, I'll play to, and each platform has their own demographics. Each chain has their own communities. So it's good to dabble and try things out. Anything can be fixed. So I don't think people should be apprehensive to try new things. And, you know, sometimes, you know, it doesn't work out, but as long as a couple of those things work out, those are the things that people will say, Bryan Brinkman did art blocks and he did this and this, you know, the things that work out. And then people don't remember, you know, these other things that are holding like lower floors or something.
If you think about certain artists and their volume, like if you think of Picasso and the volume and the amount, right? Like not every single piece of his is that museum amazing piece, but they still speak to collectors, right? So you also now create a range of opportunity for buyers when you start to go to different places, right? And I think that's also an appeal in this kind of world is someone like myself could never afford to collect art before the, you know, this era of the 2020s, right? But all of a sudden now I'm finding myself curating pieces that I like to have displayed on my screen on my computer, but I own them, and it becomes this difference and this internal connection now with the artist where I feel like I have to watch your journey. I feel like I have to be involved with what you do because I identify as a collector now. And like you said earlier, to a degree, a patron of your arts, right? Like that's what a lot of supporters in this space are when they buy an NFT piece for an artist. Because I don't think this is going to change your life maybe by buying this one piece, but it'll allow you an extra few hours to keep grinding or, you know, whatever it may be.
Yeah,
and
totally.
I think it's a great way to support.
Even without the money aspect, it's a motivator because you're seeing someone investing their time in you. If anything, like even retweets are free. Those matter to artists, you know. Talking about this like tiers of price, I think that's a big part of it. I did a speech with NFT in America, which is on YouTube, where I made this kind of pyramid. I called it a cone because in retrospect, I should have made it a left to right thing than a top to bottom pyramid. But this idea of you have the one of ones, you have like the limited editions, you have the one of X's, you have the open edition, you know, you have all these different layers, and each of those are hitting different demographics. Like, yeah, you can only create this like high end world when you start, and then over time you're going to keep putting out art, and it's very hard to keep that. And so it's about kind of figuring out, I'm going to put out maybe, you know, 5 or 10 one of ones a year. And then I'll do some like small editions, and then I'll do a bigger edition drop with something like Noble Gallery or memes or something like that. That's more open and cheap. In the same way with like art blocks, my Nimbuds is like, I think like 1 ETH, and then the Nim Teens are like 0.1 ETH. And so it's like you have this kind of division that if you can't get up here, you can still enter and still be a part of that like ecosystem. And so I think it's really important to kind of give both.
That's super appreciated from you know the aspiring high end collectors, but with a baby whale's pocketbook. Let's put it that way.
I mean, it's the same supply, so theoretically, if someone wanted to, they could they could become a whale of those really easy and make it just as valuable. But that's an NFA. I don't want anybody to. I had to learn the hard way about people artificially kind of sweeping and manipulating my values, and that not having control of that has stopped me from doing large edition drops. Like if you look at my overall, I've put out a lot of NFTs, but most of them are, with the exception of POAPs and maybe like 1 or 2 other things, almost all of them are under 500 editions. I've never done 10K. I've never done it. So I think, you know, early on I realized like there's more value in smaller editions. It feels more special to collect something.
Yeah.
I don't know. You guys might have thoughts on this, but my gut feeling is that there's a threshold in terms of supply where it no longer feels special to hold, and it feels more like this is a utility for something special I might get in the future. And what would that supply number be for you guys? I'm curious.
For art?
Yeah.
Oh,
like,
man.
where does an open edition no longer interest you because there's too much supply?
For me, it's like 100. Like once it gets
Interesting.
past 100, like I like being in that top 100. I'll collect things up to 10,000, but like 100 makes me feel special.
That's interesting. Okay.
Yeah. Man, it's very subjective for me. If it's like a one of one, like artist type, you know, where they're putting out like single pieces of art, and you know, they start doing an open edition, you know, if it's their first open edition, you know, then, you know, if open editions, like it is more one of those things where I don't expect to sell this, you know, like I'm just collecting
it's like
it
a poster.
Yeah, like a poster, ticket stub type thing where I'm like, all right, cool, I get this. But you know, I'm more in like, yeah, if there's 10, I could still see value in holding one of 10, you know, or one of 25.
Oh yeah, no, I see a lot of value in the sub 100. I would have said my number would probably be like 250. You know, like I still think, I think there's still something there, but yeah, no, I agree. Like sub 50. I've never done an open edition.
I mean, the Bored Ape poster that came out in New York a few years ago, I think I collected about 60 or 70 of them off eBay. And, you know, that was a
the Ape Fest one?
Yeah. Like,
I got like each day one?
Yep. I got like 20 of each day for some reason, but that's a story for another day.
Oh,
I got the last day. I was there last day. You know, I realized the following day that I was very sick with COVID. So apologies if I got everybody sick.
What a time to be alive.
I was just like, I don't feel so hot at this event right now. I thought it was just because I was like overwhelmed with people. But it turns out everyone had COVID at that event.
Yeah, that was your POAP for
yeah,
exactly.
That was a fun one though. Lil Wayne was great.
They throw parties. I have FOMO about Hong Kong and not going this year.
That first year, seeing the Strokes, that was like transcending. I was that was peak euphoria right there.
Oh yeah. I remember being at the bar getting a drink and hearing Beck, and I was like, is Beck opening right now? What is happening?
Yeah.
It was a pretty
people hated event. Beck. It was so weird.
That told me how old I was. I was loving it more than anyone
I know.
Else there, probably.
I actually went and saw Beck a week ago at Madison Square Garden. They played with Phoenix, and he was great. He didn't. The difference is the one we saw. He played a lot of his because he just come off winning the Grammys and stuff, so he's playing a lot of his like slow acoustic stuff. He did only the rock and stuff at MSG. And it was great.
Nice.
So don't get me wrong, his slow stuff's beautiful, whatever, but it's not the kind of stuff I want to stand around at a concert and watch.
I feel you, man.
Well, that was a fun night.
Speaking of the Ape Fest experience and things like that, they are going to be having kind of a metaverse experience for those that aren't going to be able to make it to Hong Kong, and which leads me into you playing with crypto voxels. You were dabbling in the metaverse, so to speak. I'm curious on what your thoughts are with your art kind of showing up in the metaverse in terms of experiences. Have you thought about kind of immersive experiences with your artwork?
Yeah, totally. I can think of a few examples. Early on, I was making wearables for CryptoVoxels. I was making galleries in CryptoVoxels. I have a few places. One of the, again, going back 2020, one of the things I did was I made a candy shop that was kind of inspired by Klaus Oldenburg and a lot of money and all this stuff. And I made a candy shop in CryptoVoxels, and then I sold the candy shop with franchise rights. And then that person went and built it in other metaverses, which was cool.
That's awesome.
And so I'm very much into those ideas. I've done Decentraland wearables. It was like, I think the first round was me, Ferocious, Jonathan Wolf, and like Jose Delbo, and we made like rare stuff. And then I made like an outfit for Decentraland, and then I'm trying to think with Artifacts, which is a wonderful company, not Artifact the shoe company, but Artifacts, who does 3D sculptures. I did 3D sculpture that can be brought into metaverses. I've done some SuperRare sculptures as well that can, but I worked with their team and I built an Unreal experience where you kind of go through a fun house world, inspired by the New York World's Fair site.
Wow.
And yeah, if you go to Artifact's website, you can go. Maybe
I was on it earlier, and it's pretty neat. It was quite a
fun little thing. And the music is done by Dirk, who is the artist that does all of the Aku 3D work.
Oh, nice.
And so, yeah, no, I'm super bullish on that. I'm very excited about AR coming around the corner. We're like a month away from Meta's headset, and we're like 4 months away from Apple's.
Oh, I can't wait for Apple's.
So I think, I've said it for many years on these things that we're building assets for a future augmented virtual world. All of the NFTs we make, whether they're for the walls or for the tables, and so I'm very curious to try that. And I love making digital fashion. It's a lot cheaper and easier than making physical stuff. And so, yeah, no, I'm doing a drop with a platform called Metropolis soon. That's like 2D avatar clothing, which should be interesting. Wow. And yeah, I want to play more with physical wearables too. But yeah, there's so much potential in the coming years with augmented fashion and augmented sculptures and augmented experiences. So I'm very bullish on it. I've always advised artists build assets that are interoperable. So like GLB sculptures can work in almost any metaverse. Building that kind of stuff is a much safer bet than like buying a plot of land in a metaverse like Sandbox. No diss to metaverses, but it's a much higher gamble to pick one metaverse versus building assets or buying sculptures from artists that'll work in everything going forward.
Right.
And your art has, really paid attention to the medium and where the tech is going and what your beliefs are. So to hear you kind of explain all of that definitely kind of showcases where you think things are going, and it really does lend like your opinion as you continue to put out your work. So love to hear it, man. Thank you for sharing.
Thank you so much, Bryan. I think this is a perfect time for us to, send you off the deck side, not to push you off, but to send you off your way.
Yeah, we went over the future. It's a good ending.
Yeah. It's been an absolute blast, and I feel like we've learned a lot from your insight about all of the art world and all the value you bring to it. So we appreciate you. If you haven't already, guys, give him a follow on his socials. We'll make sure to put his Twitter handle in the description of this video.
Thanks. Appreciate it.
And
this was a lot of fun. Great questions.
Yeah. Is there anything that you'd like to, just close out with? Let us know something that's exciting that's coming up that we should be paying attention to.
Well, follow me on Twitter. There's always things going on. I think this will air. I'm doing a gallery show in New York on October 6th. That'll be very fun. There'll be a lot of free goodies. That's what this print behind me is for. It's going to be hanging there. And then,
nice.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. Yeah, I don't have any specific dates in mind for upcoming drops, but I'm working on a lot of fun things.
Love it, man. Well, so go check him out on socials, guys. Give him some support. Give DECKSIDE a like if you haven't already. Make sure to subscribe to Other Space. We appreciate y'all. Have a beautiful day.